All right, now let's dive into some quick and tasty cooking. So just like in the last video, we still want to keep efficiency and organization in mind because that leads to the quick part of the cooking, right? So step one is learning how to read a recipe. So you'll see a recipe generally has this type of structure, right? How much time it's going to take, how many people it's going to serve. Hopefully there's a photo. There's generally going to be a paragraph or sometimes much more of a story that you probably don't care about that you can skip right over, and then a list of ingredients and instructions. Now, it seems like a waste of time to go through and read all of this before you get started, but I promise you it will save you time if you read through the recipe first. In our teaching kitchen, we get questions all the time about what to do next or what am I supposed to do with this ingredient. Believe me, if you read the recipe first, you'll have many fewer questions. And my hot tip is actually that if you can kind of envision the process in your mind as you're reading through it, you're going to save a lot of time, I promise. So read the recipe thoroughly before starting to cook. Then consider a couple of options here. Most chefs will tell you that you want to do mise en place, which is a French technique or a French phrase that means everything in its place. What this means is that all of the chopping, all of the measuring, all of the cracking of the eggs, all of the mincing and the dicing, everything that has to be done in advance, you do it in advance and get it into small little piles here, right? That way it's just ready to add to the pan. Now, I do some of this, but I also am a fan of a totally opposite method, which is where you prep as you go. And the reason I say that you have to kind of choose this for yourself is if you get very stressed out in the kitchen. If you're kind of slow when it comes to chopping, please do the mise en place. It'll save you a lot of stress. But if you're pretty fast with chopping, you don't really get too stressed. If something's burning, you know how to fix it, right? And you kind of like this more lackadaisical approach. If you prep as you go, you might actually save time, because I'll get some oil in the pan. While the oil's heating up, I'm chopping the onion. Then the onion goes in the pan. While the onion's cooking, I chop up my garlic. Then the garlic goes in the pan. And you can kind of save on time if you prep as you go. So I'm not going to tell you what to do here. I just want you to know that those are kind of your two very distinct options, and that knowing thyself is probably a great way to choose which one is going to be right for you. But I would recommend cleaning as you go. So a lot of times you might be cooking some onions in the pan. That's going to take 5 minutes, right? And so instead of being at the pan constantly, stirring them, waiting for them to be done, right? Do some cleaning while you're cooking, right? So there's often opportunities to get things in the dishwasher or give something a quick clean while there's something on the stove cooking, and then you'll have much less to do after you're done cooking. So in that vein, let's talk about how to spend less time overall cooking and cleaning. So one method is to cross-utilize ingredients. So I keep talking about onions, and that's because a lot of the recipes I cook use onions. I'm sure you feel the same way. So if you're going to be making a few recipes in 1 week and it requires chopped onions, just chop all the onions one time. Store the extra in the fridge, and you can kind of use them all week to save yourself time. Rice is another one. If you're going to be using rice a few times during the week, make it once and use it for a few days, right? I like to buy a rotisserie chicken, either cold or hot, at the grocery store. Buy it hot, you eat it that night, or buy it cold, or use the leftovers from the hot ones, and you have lots of options for dinner, making homemade stocks and soups. You can make a chicken salad, you can make tacos, right? So think about how to take one ingredient, like a rotisserie chicken, and to spread that out over meals throughout the week. It can save you a lot of time. Cooking in bulk. So I'm frequently cooking for one, but I very infrequently cook for one. I cook for 4 or 6. And then I eat a few of those meals that week, and I freeze the rest so that when I have a particularly stressful week, or I have a week where I'm flying here one day and then I'm home for a couple days and then I'm flying out and I don't really want to go to the grocery store just to shop for 2 days, right? You can kind of use what's in your freezer. So think about freezing some leftovers. Sheet pan and one-pot meals are a huge time saver, right? This is just like what it sounds like. You dump everything onto a pan and you put it in the oven, or you dump everything into a pot, you put it on the stove, wham, bam, you're done. And then there's very little cleanup afterwards, right? So think about those nights when you might have only 30 minutes to cook and then you're going to be totally wiped from your day at work, or running the kids to school, or taking a long study session if you're in graduate or professional school, right? Think about kind of those times where you might want to rely on these types of meals that come together really quickly and will not require much cleanup. And then finally, use those grocery store shortcuts that we talked about early. Buying the frozen foods, the canned foods, or those pre-cut and prepared fresh foods. I bet a lot of you eat a lot of meals that you make in the microwave. And no shame there. I do too. In fact, sometimes when I'm lecturing to students, they only have a microwave. They don't have access to a stove or an oven. And there are actually plenty of health-promoting meals that you can make using just a microwave. One of my favorites, something I do at home, is a loaded baked sweet potato. So you can buy like a canned vegetarian chili, you buy a sweet potato. If you poke some holes in the sweet potato, put it in the microwave, it's done in a matter of minutes. You split it open, you add some canned vegetarian chili, maybe a little bit of sour cream, you can do some fresh herbs or whatever you like to put on it. But really you can make all of that in the microwave. Cauliflower rice with curry. So you can buy curries kind of shelf stable or pre-prepared. You can make a cauliflower rice that you buy frozen and just make it in the bag in a matter of minutes, kind of heat it all up together, and you can have a cauliflower rice with curry. The first time I taught this curriculum, it was actually in person at the medical school here at Yale, and I made in our lecture hall an egg scramble in the microwave. So I think a lot of people are probably surprised to hear that you can make scrambled eggs in the microwave, and I bet you'd be even more surprised to hear that they're actually pretty good. So what I did was I took a combination of some peppers and some onions that I bought frozen. I cooked them in the microwave. I added some eggs, scrambled it up. You can add a little Calabrian chili or some hot sauce or some pesto or some cheese, whatever you like. Scramble it up, put it in the microwave, just stir it every, 15 or so seconds. And within a couple minutes, it's really going to be done. And like I said, really delicious. Great way to pack in some protein and some vegetables, even frozen, in a really easy way in your microwave. Salmon brown rice bowls. You probably have seen these salmon bowls with rice and seaweed that were popularized on TikTok, right? So you can do the same thing with some kind of minute rice that you can buy and make in the microwave. You can do that with some canned salmon and with some other kind of shelf-stable ingredients, a little bit of perhaps sesame seeds on top, pair it with a cucumber if you'd like. Really easy to make a salmon brown rice bowl in the microwave. Spaghetti squash with marinara sauce. Again, the first time I was teaching this curriculum, I asked, what are your ideas for any microwave meals? And someone said spaghetti squash with marinara sauce. And I said, that's a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? So you can take a spaghetti squash, cut it in half, put it face down with a little bit of water on a plate, and you can make that in the microwave. Take out that squash, which kind of looks like spaghetti, add some canned marinara sauce, and you have yourself a meal. And then another big one is oatmeal. So you can make oatmeal in the microwave. If you have instant oats, you just take some hot water, of course, and add those to the oats. But even old-fashioned and steel-cut oats you can make in the microwave. So think about oatmeal too. Not just sweet preparations, you can also do savory preparations for dinner. So lots of options for some microwave meals here. A few more of my favorites that really involve no cooking at all that you just buy off the shelf are some of the ones that you see here. I'm obsessed with these Cuban black beans. So these come in packets. You just open the packet a little bit to vent. And again, you microwave them for like 60, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and they're totally done. So I like to keep some of these on hand for the days where I come home at 8 or 9 o'clock and it's either Uber Eats or I have to eat something out of my pantry that involves no effort at all. So I like to keep some of these on hand for that purpose. Now, some top tips to make your food taste good. Because again, I'm a chef. I know you probably want to hear what do I think are some of the best ways to make your food actually taste good. And you probably are doing many of these at home already. But if you're not, think about how you can incorporate this into what you're already doing. And I think it's going to really kind of level your food up a little bit. These are the top things that I see people not doing in the home kitchen that a professional chef would say, this is maybe where we can inject some more flavor. One is using wine or stock. So for instance, if I'm going to make rice and I'm going to pair it with some chicken, I am not going to cook the rice in water. I'm going to cook it in a mix of water and chicken stock because the chicken stock is going to add some extra flavor. You could do the same thing with vegetable stock. When I'm deglazing a pan, so if I brown some chicken in a pan, you take the chicken out, there's some brown stuff stuck to the bottom of the pan. That's called fond, F-O-N-D. Those brown bits taste so good, but the problem is they're stuck to the bottom of the pan. So you want to get those off the bottom of the pan and into the sauce or the whatever mix you're making in that pan. And you do that by deglazing, which is adding some liquid. So this is a great time to add a little bit of wine. If you consume wine, you cook it down until it's almost dry, and then all of that brown bits, all of that fond, comes up off the bottom of the pan and into what you're making, adds so much flavor. And again, if you don't like to use wine, you could use stock for that as well. Don't forget to add salt and oil. So I think people really understand, okay, salt, not good for me. Oil, a lot of calories, and then they stop using both. At restaurants, if you ever have wondered why a salad tastes so good at a restaurant or why the food you get at a restaurant just tastes so much better than what you're eating at home, the reason is probably that they're using a lot more salt and a lot more oil. So you don't have to go to the extreme that we do in restaurants, but if you don't forget to add that oil and that salt at home, it'll really amp up the flavor of your cooking a lot. The oil is important because you really want to get your food browned. And salt is really important because salt is our only flavor enhancer that we have. What do I mean by that? I mean that when you add salt to green beans, they will taste more like green beans. I know it sounds crazy, but you can believe me, I promise it's true. Try it for yourself. So adding an adequate amount of salt to your food really amps up the flavor in and of itself. Adding acid. This is one of the top things I see people not doing. So what do I mean by acid? I mean vinegars, basically, or citrus juices. Lemon, lime juice, grape juice, things like that. If you taste your dish and you're like, okay, there's enough salt, there's enough oil, there's enough heat, it has some savoriness, like what am I missing? The chances are it's acid. You want a little brightness, a little zing, right? It adds a lot of complexity. And if you take whatever you're making and just add a spritz of lemon juice or a little bit of vinegar, it really, really, really elevates it. So be sure to pay attention to how much acid you're using. Add spices. I don't have to tell you that spices taste really good. Add as many of those as you like. Same things with herbs. Herbs add a lot of flavor. I like to use fresh herbs. I think most chefs would recommend that. If you don't have access to fresh herbs or they're too costly, store-bought, kind of dried is fine, but really wherever you can, I recommend using fresh. I mentioned earlier that the browning of the food is very important. So let me bring that point back up again. Brown food tastes good, right? And so you really want to spend the time to get your food browned. Don't flip that chicken too quickly. Don't stir your mushrooms too much. Give them time to really be contacting that pan so that they can get nice and brown. That adds so much flavor. So don't rush it. Don't fuss with it. Get that food browned. And then don't overcook it. So I think a lot of people have this idea that using a meat thermometer is like cheating, and that's something that only a home cook would do, and chefs just know when food is done perfectly. Not true. Home cooks, I find, really aren't using a meat thermometer. They're just like kind of guessing, and we're all scared of food poisoning, so you end up overcooking your food. And then it's tough, it's chewy, it's not very moist, right? Chefs are constantly using meat thermometers. So look up online how hot you should cook your food and then use a thermometer to get it just there. Hot tip, for when it comes to chicken and other meats like this, you probably want to pull it off the heat or out of the oven 5 degrees before it's done. And that's because of something called carryover cooking. So you take the meat off of the pan or out of the oven, you put it on a plate, and the temperature inside will continue to rise generally about another 5 degrees over the next 5 minutes. So if you're trying to cook something to 160 degrees, pull it off the pan at 155, let it sit, and then it'll make its way up to the perfect 160. This will keep your meat tender and juicy every time. All right, so now we've covered a lot of things here: how to buy food, what to do when we're grocery shopping, how to set up our kitchen, how to cook, how to eat healthier in general. And now the goal is, how do we make this sustainable?